Hi everyone, Danny Bader here, and I'm excited to welcome you back to yet another episode of our podcast, 11 Minutes to Inspiration, where we offer you information, some interviews with some really cool people, and simply observations for your consideration that are all designed to support you in being inspired to continue creating a happy and fulfilling life. Because after all, that's why we're here, right? Hi everybody, and welcome to another edition of 11 Minutes to Inspiration. I'm Danny Bader, and I've got a wonderful guest, a friend of mine, Janet Sarkos, today. And I think you'll find a lot of value in this subject that we're going to speak about. You know, we're often inspired as people when we see other folks or organizations that support all of us on this journey called life. And you'll hear how Janet's organization helps to keep people on the journey when they get to that dark place that many of us can go. So Janet, welcome. Thank you for your time. Why don't you tell us all a little bit about what you do in your organization?
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to speak with you today. I am the executive director of an organization called Caring Contact.
Okay.
We are a small crisis hotline in northern New Jersey, part of a network of 160 organizations that look similar to ours across the United States. We answer the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline for a very large portion of northern New Jersey. And what that means is that anybody who calls the 800 number, which is 800-273-8255, anywhere with a cell phone that originates in northern New Jersey lands with us.
Got it.
So that's essentially what we do.
Got it. Good. Give that number again real quick.
I'll say it over and over.
Yes.
I say it everywhere I go.
That's a good number to have.
Yes, 800-273-8255.
Okay, great. We'll get more contact information at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Janet knows, and many of you know my story. When I was 28, I had a tragedy where I lost a friend of mine. And, I had a lot of feelings of blame and guilt and those other things, and went to that dark place, where you think that's your only choice right now. And thankfully, I didn't go down and finish out on that road, so to speak. But Janet, why don't you tell us a little bit about what are some of the statistics around this, suicide?
Yeah, it is a very high cause of death in every age group, which is so interesting. But I always like to ask people, what do you think is the group of people who are most exposed or most susceptible to suicide? I mean, I like to hear what people have to say about that.
The age group of people that are most exposed to those thoughts. Yeah. I would say high school, college.
Yeah.
When they're going through the transition in life and the pressure and stress of the real world.
A lot of people feel that way, and we worry a lot about kids, so I get that. But surprisingly, the group that has the highest incidence of suicide are white males between 45 and 65. So I'm going to guess you're in that group.
Wow.
Which is
white males between 45 and 65 years of age are the
right. And the second most susceptible group that we need to really watch for are the elderly, believe it or not.
The elderly.
So yeah,
wow.
I mean, it is a very, very bad problem for young people, so we do pay attention to all the groups, but we can't ignore the ones that maybe you don't think about.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, they were not my two first guesses, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. So tell a little bit about, how would you just, in your experience, how would you describe, the state of mind that somebody gets to when they're considering ending their own life? What happens?
What we have learned is that people who are thinking about suicide in that moment where it's really, really imminent, the emotional part of their brain has pretty much taken over. Rational thinking isn't really in effect, and that is just so much noise, and it's so stressful for them. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that if we can connect with people who are in that place and bring that emotional level down so that their rational thinking can kind of come into balance with the emotional side of things in that moment, we know that we can keep people safe right then. That's one of the big things that we talk about is safe for now, because many people, many people have difficult problems. There's mental illness, there are situations that are terrible, and so suicidal thoughts are something that happen to people. But that moment where the act happens, if we can take those emotional levels down, they might be able to stay safe, move forward, and get some real help.
Right. Yeah. So when you think about it, and this is in my work too, I know that we act from our emotions,
right?
And not our logic. And this is certainly a very serious part of that. Where it shows up in life. And there's only a lot of the studying that I do, a lot of eight emotions maybe. Anger, fear, despair, joy. In this case, it would just probably be anger, fear, and despair.
Yeah. And one of the things that is always on my mind is especially anger. Anger is sort of a blanket emotion, and there's always underlying emotions under it. So anger just sort of masks something else that's going on underneath. So whenever I see people who are angry, I know that it's probably fear or sadness or despair that's lying underneath the anger. So I never, we train our listeners to get past the anger, to not let that bother them, to not take it personally, try to dig underneath, because there are some things that can be worked on underneath the anger. Yeah,
that is good to hear. So Janet, what are some of the things, the signs that we should look for when somebody gets to a point where they're considering suicide?
So sometimes it's hard to tell. A lot of people wear masks. We all wear masks.
Oh yeah.
And
I wore a good mask.
Exactly, and it's often to protect the people that we care about and love. They don't want to be a burden. So you have to work hard to pay attention. But the things that we watch for are feelings. Some of the things that we just talked about. If somebody's acting particularly angry or sad, or is, just if you can really pay attention to what people are feeling, that might be a red flag. Another thing we look for are actions that they're taking. Some of the typical things that you think of, like giving away possessions or saying goodbye, or acting kind of strange. So feelings combined with actions, and then the most important piece of this are changes. So if somebody is typically sort of a low energy person, and all of a sudden they're upbeat, they're happy, they're acting really different in a positive way even, maybe that means they've made a decision to end their life. Or vice versa, they're all usually happy, but all of a sudden they're in their room all the time, under the covers, sleeping too much, not sleeping enough. So changes in their normal behavior. And all of these things that we're looking for, we call those invitations to ask.
Invitations to ask.
Invitations to ask. So that's what we watch for in other people. Their feelings, their actions, changes, things that they're saying.
So a dramatic personality change, either way.
Exactly.
To the withdrawal, negative.
Exactly.
Or even more kind of happy, euphoric, where they're not always like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the invitation to ask, I think that's a great line, because for many of us, I think we would always say, I don't know what they're going through.
Yeah.
And I'll offer to people now, that's okay. How could you know what they're going through?
Right.
And even sometimes I'll talk with, people who struggle, and they'll say, well, people say, they say stupid things to me or whatever.
Right.
They don't, and I try to say, just focus on the fact that they care enough to say something.
Right.
Don't filter that it maybe wasn't the right, because they're having the courage and the heart to kind of talk to you about where you are, whether it's this despondent down on the suicide, or even up that scale a little bit more, just where we're challenging, we're challenged by life, as you said.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when we talk about that invitation to ask, it's all about what you say and how you say it. It's so important to sort of set your own judgments aside, really to try to be non-judgmental. And then one of the most important things that I try to convey to people is you have to ask. All of those invitations that you see, no one's going to come to you and say, hey, I've been feeling really, really down lately. I've been thinking about suicide. Could you help me find some resources to help me feel better? That conversation is never going to happen.
Right.
They're waiting to be asked. They're waiting for a safe, non-judgmental space where they can talk. And
Right.
if they find it, what we see across the board is that they are relieved to have a space to talk about what they're feeling.
Sure. So the invitation to ask is just such a wonderful concept, and I think it's a good framework for us, as people that may identify somebody that's struggling.
Yeah.
What else are some other strategies?
So let me talk about that invitation to ask for
Sure,
a second,
yeah.
because one of the things that we teach that is so important, and I know that this is hard, but because people are not comfortable around the topic of suicide.
Sure.
But what we really ask people to do is not beat around the bush, to ask clearly and directly.
Right.
So to say, I've noticed that you've been feeling a little bit down lately,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to ask you if suicide is something you've been thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can say, I know that you've been acting out, you've been mad at your mom, you're talking about not wanting to be here anymore, you're
Mm-hmm.
disgusted with your life. And sometimes when people feel that way, they think about killing themselves.
Sure, yeah.
Is that something you've been thinking about? So saying the word,
Mm-hmm.
killing yourself, suicide, do you want to die, is
Mm-hmm.
so important. And I know how uncomfortable that is, because
Yeah.
the first time I had to practice doing that,
Sure.
I couldn't even say the words.
You can't get 'em
It
out,
felt
yeah.
so uncomfortable. But when you say to somebody, are you going to hurt yourself?
Mm-hmm.
That's ambiguous,
Mhm.
because somebody who's might be thinking about dying actually thinks that, no, I'm not going to hurt myself, I'm going to finally feel better.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not direct enough.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can all practice being clear, non-judgmental, calm,
Mm-hmm.
and compassionate when we ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
I have never had a person who was insulted that I
Mhm.
asked them that.
Right.
If they're not thinking about suicide, the reaction I get is, "Oh, I'm not. No, absolutely not. I'm just having a really bad day."
Right.
And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
If they are thinking about suicide, across the board, what you hear is, I am.
Yeah.
Like, utter relief.
And that's got to be such a relief
Yeah.
for that person who's struggling
Yeah.
to be able to
Right.
have the conversation, or at least
Yeah.
put it in the room, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you asked me what's next. After you ask that question,
Right.
what do you do?
Mhm.
People are terrified, and I get that.
Mm-hmm.
I encourage you to not panic.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to call 911 in that moment.
Mhm.
You've opened yourself up to a conversation.
Mhm.
So if you can commit yourself after asking that question to
Mhm.
really being there for that person,
Mm-hmm.
say very little, do a lot of listening,
Sure.
let them talk.
Mm-hmm.
And as you listen to their story, listen for their feelings,
Mhm.
because you don't have the experience that they're having. You can't possibly know what they're going through. It's nothing you've ever been through. It's their story. But what you can connect with them
Right.
on is what they're feeling.
Sure.
So if you're listening for their feelings, to say,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, that must have been devastating for you.
Mhm.
It was devastating.
Sure.
And then they feel understood and they feel validated. So
Mhm.
you have to spend the time really listening to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's to ask the question, right?
Mhm.
To bring the
Yep.
suicide topic into the room.
Right.
And
Ask
then,
the question, be there for that person.
and then just to say, tell me about it.
Tell
Or
me about it.
can you tell
and
me
that's
about
an
it, or-
open-ended question.
Sure.
And that's exactly what we're looking for, an
Okay.
open-ended question.
And
So
then just listen.
I know this is kind of cheesy, but to think of it, we think of the ABCs.
Mhm.
Ask the question.
Okay.
Be there for that person. And
Right.
the C is collaborate.
Okay.
So, and I mean collaborate because I could never tell you what to do.
Right.
I don't know the intimate details of your life,
Sure.
but you do.
Yes.
And so if you get to a point with someone where you've asked them, they are
Mhm.
thinking about it, you've heard their story,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully you have found through listening to their story to, certain connections to life that they have.
Yeah.
Yes, it's awful.
Yes.
But you talk to me about how much you love your parents, or
Mhm.
but you've talked to me about how much you've always wanted to travel to Europe,
Yes.
or whatever that thing is that you've heard in their story.
Sure.
To say, let's give you an opportunity, to do that.
Right.
Will you work with me to just try to keep you safe enough so that you can at least try,
Move towards that.
move towards that.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
you collaborate with them to come up with a plan.
Sure. Well, that's so important, and kind of ties back to what I think is so powerful is vision, right? The ability for us to imagine what needs to be real.
Exactly.
And there's a whole different set of emotions, right? When we paint a picture in our head of a better place than where we are right
Yeah.
now. You know, there's a shift in our neurotransmitters and all the chemicals and
Absolutely.
everything.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. No, ABC, I don't think it's cheesy at all. So it's ask the question, be there for them,
And then
which
collaborate.
and then collaborate.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember, you know, when I was down in the Outer Banks of North Carolina and I was in this dark place, I called my mom and she said, when are you coming home? We can't wait to see you.
Yeah.
And I had a lump in my throat, you know, as big as this lamp right here.
Yeah.
And she didn't even know what I was, she knew I was hurting, but she didn't know
Right.
that I was thinking what I was thinking.
Right.
And that was, you know, it's that power of when are you coming home? So now I just had a little vision of going home,
Right.
from driving home, and it kind of,
Yeah.
it gets you
And-
out of that funk and you're starting to move forward a little
Yeah.
bit versus just swirling in all of our anguish. You
That's
know?
it's a good example of it didn't solve your problems.
Oh,
It
no.
didn't end the things that you were struggling with, but there was that glimmer.
Oh yeah.
And so if you as a person who's listening to another person can help them find that glimmer and help them move toward that,
Sure.
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
What other strategies? Anything else besides ABC, or just keep it simple like that?
You know, keep it simple, but I think that all of us need to pay more attention to each other. It's, you know, we can sit down and have that ABC conversation, but I think the bigger question sometimes is, how do you know you should have it?
Right.
Open yourself up to paying attention to other people and what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
I just worked with a group of teachers on Sunday, and they're constrained in their jobs. They don't have hours to sit and listen to a kid who might be struggling,
Right.
but they might have 2 minutes at the end of the day to say, hey, you know, I noticed that you're not yourself today, and I want you to know that I'm here for you if you want to talk. That momentary kindness, that human connection is absolutely healing, as you said with your mom. I mean, it's all about connection.
Yeah.
And that connection is just being able to understand each other and how you're feeling.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I see it every day. And
Yeah.
it is healing, and it does work.
Yeah.
So it is pretty simple, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a good framework.
Yeah.
And I think about that when, you know, Dr. William James said the deepest principle of human nature is the craving to be appreciated. And I'd even put /loved, right? To love and to
Absolutely.
be loved.
Yep.
And that's when we're feeling that way in that dark place, right? Anybody out there feeling that way right now, you don't feel loved, you don't feel appreciated.
Yeah.
Not by other people, but even yourself.
Yeah.
You know, you can't love yourself for some reason. You know, we make bad choices, we screw up. The world
We're
throws
hard
us a
on
curveball.
ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just that ability to stop and understand that that's an okay place to be, right?
Right.
We get there.
Absolutely. You know,
It's not okay that you want to get there, but just to acknowledge that, well, I'm a human being, and this is one of the places that we get.
Yeah.
My mind's a little broken, my heart's a little broken, my ability to think rationally is, you know, I always say that my brain was broken back then.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
people will say to me sometimes, you know, I can't believe this person said they heard voices or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I can believe it. Trust me, I can believe it.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
just to know that, stop and just kind of jam a wedge in there and say, man, this sucks right now.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay.
It is, and you know, right now September is National Suicide Prevention Month, and I've been thinking a lot about it. I realize that I'm in this world, I'm talking to people all the time about it. I'm very comfortable, and that has changed me. So if there's one thing that I hope that just, you know, I see in the media, there's a lot of talk about it now. I hope that people will start getting comfortable around the topic of suicide and talking to people about it.
Yeah, we have
Because when I think about somebody who's thinking about suicide, to me, in my mind, the way that I can handle that conversation is to understand that they are simply in a lot of pain.
Yes.
And they want the pain to stop.
Sure.
So that's all they can think of in that moment of high
And
stress
that's their only
and
option.
emotion.
They don't have a multiple choice, right?
Exactly.
This is it. My
That's-
pain stops.
That's what they're feeling at that
Right.
moment. We all know that that's not the case. There
Right.
are always options.
Sure.
So if we as fellow human beings can step in and help that person momentarily stop their pain so that they can then move forward and take care of themselves, to me it's a gift. So
Yeah.
this month, that's my hope, is that
Yeah.
people can start just getting comfortable with the word, the topic. It is scary, obviously. It's
Yes.
terrifying. But everyday people, regular everyday people can have a huge effect. I see it constantly. Every single person who answers our hotline is just a regular person. They're not all therapists and doctors and police officers and people who are in those helping professions. They're just people who are trained to just listen to another person.
So often in times, suicide, the topic, the subject is heightened in awareness when a celebrity will take their life.
Right.
You know, recently Kate Spade tragically took her life, Anthony Bourdain, and then Brian Dawkins, who was a safety for the Philadelphia Eagles, All-Pro, was inducted into the Hall of Fame and gave a tremendous speech that's out there, and he talked about his feelings of suicide. Here's an All-Pro NFL linebacker, you know, so we got to understand that it happens to all of us. But he also talked about the support that he got from his wife, which was wonderful. So at what point when we have a conversation with somebody and we talk about the ABCs and we realize that this subject of suicide is on the table and is an option for them, how then do we go about getting a third party or somebody else involved?
I love that.
Because somebody say, don't tell anybody, So what do you think?
I firmly believe that this is the moment to call the hotline, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which I'll say the number again, 800-273-8255. What a lot of people don't understand about the hotline is that people who are in crisis call, but people who are worried about somebody in crisis also call. And so we will collaborate with you and help you try to figure out what the next steps are. And everybody who answers that line is trained to do that. It's a really nice resource because it's free. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We will spend as much time with you as you need. There are people who think about suicide for years and who also live their lives. It doesn't always have to be a call 911 type of an emergency. They just need a constant connection and they need care. So I think the best first step in that moment is to call the lifeline. There are people who call all the time, over and over again, just because they need that connection, they need the support, and then they can move forward. There are also times when you need 911. We can help you sort that through. Or if you already know that there's somebody who's bleeding or who already took pills, it's always call 911.
911, right?
Absolutely. But unless it's that moment, that imminent moment, I say call the lifeline. There's something really freeing about calling somebody who doesn't know you. It'll remain confidential, and you can get some real help and then move forward. You retain control of your situation.
Absolutely. How about some success stories that you and your wonderful team have contributed to?
I have to tell you that I didn't say this before, but I am not only part of the business end of this hotline, I'm a volunteer. I listen on the hotline. I've been doing it for years. I've done hundreds of hours listening on the hotline, so I have my own stories. And you know, I've talked to
Give us a good one.
I'll give you a good one. There's one that's.
They're all good. I shouldn't even say that.
Really,
they're all amazing.
The people who call touch me so much. And I think about them. But this is, this story that I'll share with you is a great example of how I did not call for emergency services, even though it's a dramatic story. And this is the power of that connection. I got a call from a young person, a college student one day, who I picked up the phone and she said, I'm standing on the edge of a 6th story parking structure and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not sure what's going on. So, you know, in that situation, you think, you know, call 911. But what we're trained to do, and what I did is I said, okay, you know, I'm really glad you called. I'm here for you, and let's have a conversation. And she said, okay, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, would you please do me the favor just for right this moment of stepping away from that ledge so that we can have a conversation, because I have all the time you need, but I think I'm going to be worrying about you falling if you're in that vulnerable spot. I'm not saying you can't go back. You can go back. That's your choice. But just while we talk, would you back away from that ledge? And she said, okay, I think I can do that. So she walked across the parking structure and sat down in the stairwell and said, I'm in the stairwell, and is that okay? Can I sit here? And I said, yeah, that'll be okay. So I spent about 45 minutes hearing her story. She had a lot of things going on, and she was struggling, and talked about how she always walked by the structure and was fantasizing about being up there, but was always able to keep herself down. In that moment on this day, she didn't really know what happened, but she found herself on that ledge. But she, as we talked for those 45 minutes or so, she kind of calmed down and said, I don't think I want to jump, and I don't know what got me there, and I'm really scared. So after about that 45 minutes, I said, would you consider continuing to talk with me, but going down to ground level? So she had the phone, and we walked down to ground level, and she sat down on a bench outside the parking structure, and we continued to talk for a while longer. And her story is long and involved, but essentially at the end of it, she said, I have never told anybody that I had thoughts about suicide, and you made it okay for me to tell you that. And I know I have some things that I need to do. One of the things she had told me about in her story is that she had this great mom and dad, and she had this wonderful sister who she's close with. And she had never shared these things with them. And she said to me in this portion where we were collaborating to keep her safe at the end, she said, I think I need to talk to my mom. You made me realize that maybe it's okay to talk about it. And so I said, can I walk you to your car? I'm on the phone. But can I walk you to your car and just kind of get you moving toward home? And she said, yeah. So we went to her car, and she said, okay, I think I'm okay to go now. You would think that it would have been emergency, parking structure, jumping 6 floors, but she was safe in that moment. And I just felt so confident that she was okay for that moment. And so we collaborated on a bigger plan, but she was okay on that day, in that moment. And that, I think about that story all the time, because it touches me. And when I know that somebody feels after talking to me, a stranger, that they can now move forward and talk to a loved one, I know that they're on the road toward doing better.
That is great. That is a wonderful
think about her all the time.
Story. Yeah, I'm sure she's doing well.
I hope so.
Good. Man, that's amazing. So why don't you just tell us right now where folks could get in touch with you again if they wanted to find out more about your organization, and then the phone number one more time.
Okay.
That'll be great.
So our organization is called Caring Contact, and we're at caringcontact.org.
Okay.
So you can look at our website. And I have to say, if the story of listening touches you, we use volunteers to answer our hotline. So if you're near us in New Jersey, we would love to have you talk to us about volunteering.
Great.
Or I can help people find another location closer to them if that's what they're interested in doing.
Great.
It is incredibly valuable work. It's amazing. So look at our website, give us a call for that. But the hotline is the most important thing. I know everybody hopefully isn't getting bored of the number.
No, let's give it one more time.
800-273-8255.
That is perfect.
Give us a call.
Perfect.
Thanks.
So Janet, thank you so very much for all the information
and
for the wonderful work that you and your team do. It's great work. Everybody needs it. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care, folks.
Bye.
Well, thanks a lot for joining us for another episode of 11 Minutes to Inspiration. I thought it was just great. I had a really good time doing this one. I'll trust you gained value and insight as you continue to create and harness the tremendous power of inspiration. And as always, I'm wishing you much happiness and fulfillment on this wonderful journey called life.